So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the annual overview session for the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program and the 2022 and 2023 Qualified Allocation Plan. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. We'll be responding to questions at the end. However, we ask that you type questions as they occur to you in the chat box, especially if you need to hop off early. We'll be sure to address them at the end and in a frequently asked questions posting on CHFA's website. Please keep your lines muted until the question and answer period, and then mute and unmute yourself as necessary. This event is being recorded, and the audio will be posted on CHFA's website, as well as a PowerPoint of this presentation. Please continue to visit CHFA's website and watch for emails that announce additional information. We're planning on a session at the Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference in November, which you may also find beneficial to attend. My name is Terry Nash Giovannucci. I will be highlighting important policy revisions to the QAP that apply to applications contemplated for the 2022 9% credit round. While I am providing a broad overview, I am joined by my colleagues from CHFA, Department of Housing, Department of Developmental Services, and the State Historic Preservation Office, who bring their details, expertise, and guidance to inform your application preparation. So every year, CHFA's Board of Directors and its task force convene meetings to consider the allocation of tax credits and the QAP's role in supporting the state's affordable housing policy. Revisions to the QAP take into consideration policy shifts and data analysis of past production, along with comments from the public. In developing the 2022 and 2023 QAP, multiple opportunities were provided for input, and comments were solicited in working groups, roundtables, and listening sessions, as well as at more formal public input and public comment periods. Next, yes, thank you. The 2022 and 2023 QAP is a result of tremendous outreach and customer feedback and is based on broad policy goals that address comments we have been hearing for some time. First, it is a 2-year QAP, providing greater predictability to the community. The QAP governs the credits available in 2022 and in 2023. Second, it recognizes the significant differences between preservation and new construction deals and institutes 2 new classifications that do not compete against each other. Preservation, which is the substantial rehabilitation of existing occupied multifamily rental housing, and new construction, which is essentially everything else. It is anticipated that 25% of the reservations from each annual credit ceiling will be made under the preservation classification, and 75% of the reservations will be made under the new construction classification. Be aware, though, that the amount of annual awards or reservations made in each classification could vary based on, relevant considerations and limitations necessary to achieve the objectives of the plan. Applications submitted under the preservation classification will not be scored this year. Instead, they'll be evaluated based on specific priorities. Applicants applying under the preservation classification will be competing against each other within that classification. There are no points awards. There's specific priorities on which applications will be evaluated. So just to reiterate, applications submitted under the preservation classification will not be scored, but instead they'll be evaluated based on specific priorities, including greatest need, connection to community revitalization, expiring use, preservation in areas of opportunity, energy efficiency and sustainability, and the experience of the developer. All factors are considered when evaluating an application. Simply being the most expensive does not ensure success. Continued broad policy goals include rental affordability and supportive housing, a family focus on non-age restricted housing, sustainable and energy efficient design, and deconcentrating poverty. There remains a great need for apartments affordable to extremely low and very low income households, deep income targeting and mixed income housing, inclusive of supportive housing units for special needs populations, remains a key policy goal as we're supporting the state's work to end homelessness. You'll learn more about the sustainable design measures and efforts to deconcentrate poverty through opportunity mapping later in this presentation. Both have been revised for 2022 and 2023. Okay, so there's important updates that bear highlighting that will be delved into more deeply later on, but I want to point out that those interested in applying for tax credits in 2022 need to download and complete a preliminary application. This is new for this year. And once CHFA receives your preliminary application, the mandatory pre-application conference with CHFA and DOH staff will be scheduled. You are encouraged to complete the preliminary application and attend your pre-application conference as early as possible in order to obtain the most benefit from the meeting. As a reminder, applicants that have received prior LIHTC awards will not be eligible to submit a LIHTC application for additional developments unless previously awarded developments are on track to meet benchmarks. This is a conversation that you could have at that preliminary application conference. So again, the application's online. You can download it, complete it, hit submit, and it is emailed directly to CHFA. Credit limits have not changed. Applicants are advised to be mindful that the limits may not be exceeded as waivers are not permitted. So you have to be very careful when you're completing your applications. 9% credits are not to exceed $30,000 per qualified unit. They are not to exceed 20% of the population component of the 2022 credit ceiling. And 4% credits are available to tax-exempt bond finance deals limited to the amount of credits necessary for the financial feasibility of the project. Applicants are expected to maximize debt in all cases. Changes made to the points structure reflect CHFA's and the state's policies. Note that rental affordability remains the highest priority and so has the greatest amount of points in this QAP. And again, as a reminder, this scoring mechanism relates only to the new construction component of the QAP. We have a total of 100 points, and you can see the weight. Rental affordability is again the highest, financial efficiency and sustainability the next, local commitment and impact, followed by opportunity characteristics, and qualifications and experience, the least weighted. The changes made from the prior QAP reflect the new classifications. You'll see that there are no points for preservation proposals. Points are increased to reflect the importance of service to the extremely low and very low income households, and for providing enhanced resident service coordination. There is an additional opportunity to achieve 2 points for developments that earn 6 points or more in opportunity characteristics and commit to a minimum affordability period of 50 years. Financial efficiency and design hasn't changed too much, except that there's been a reduction in the importance of cost effectiveness in hard cost, credits per qualified bedroom, and credit equity being less than 50% total uses, cost effectiveness, intermediary costs. These points categories weren't driving the results we had intended. Sustainable design measures have increased, as you will learn soon, and points are increased accordingly. There's now a greater menu of options to address the state's goals around greenhouse gas reduction and energy efficiency. Points have been added to incentivize development in areas with concerted community revitalization plans in place that meet the needs of the neighborhoods and communities in which the development is sited. That is the main change, the only change in local commitment and impact. There's no change in the incentives provided for developments located in an area with greater opportunity for families that serve to deconcentrate poverty. The mapping tool has changed to reflect the adoption of the state's Connecticut Opportunity Map. More to come on that a little bit later. The same points, though, for opportunity characteristics. And there is no change to the points provided for qualifications and experience. So what I have just presented is just a very high-level view of the important changes in the 2022 and 2023 QAP. Details and specifics follow. I will then pass off this presentation to my colleague Debbie Alter to delve more deeply into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the overview session. So I would like to start out with reminding you of the important dates. So the pre-application notifications to SHPO and SEPA should be submitted by this Friday, the 15th, in order to meet the 90-day requirement, 90 days before the application due date for the 9% round. We are now accepting the preliminary applications that Terry mentioned. We will accept them until November 19th. We expect that the pre-application conferences will take place between November 1st and December 10th. That will give everyone enough time to tweak the proposals if necessary before the application due date. If you're interested in CHFA taxable bond programs, those applications for soft letters of interest will be due on December 7th. And it's expected that those letters would be, soft letters would be issued by the end of the year, December 31st. I will be explaining these products in more detail later in the presentation. The applications must be uploaded to SharePoint, and January 5th is the deadline to request a SharePoint site. The instructions for doing so can be found on the website. They will also be discussed later in this presentation. And the deadline to submit the 9% application is 4 p.m. on January 12th, 2022. It is very important to make sure all your uploads are submitted by 4 p.m. because the SharePoint site will automatically shut down. Okay, we do have a new preliminary application process this year. All potential 9% applicants are required to submit a preliminary application. The form is found on CHFA's website, chfa.org. There is a quick link to it from the homepage. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the list of quick links. The preliminary application form must be downloaded to your computer. It cannot be completed online and submitted. You just have to download it and then press the submit button. And as Terry said, an email will pop up automatically to send it. No other exhibits are required with the submission. If you feel there is something that you'd like us to take a look at or might inform the discussion at the pre-application conference, please feel free to attach it. But please keep in mind we do have a limit on the size of email attachments. If for some reason you can't submit it, just please contact me and we'll set up a share file site. And as I mentioned, the applications are due no later than November 19th. Following the receipt of a preliminary application, CHFA staff will reach out to schedule a virtual pre-application conference. Participants in that conference will include CHFA and DOH underwriting and technical services staff. And your applicants may include any members of the development team that you feel should be part of it, anyone that has questions or anyone that can inform the discussion. That can include architects, GCs, any member of the development team is welcome to attend. And as I said, we expect these conferences to take place between November 1st and December 10th. So as Terry mentioned, only the new construction classification will be scored. So the point changes that I'm going to discuss here apply only to new construction applications. In the rental affordability section, the maximum points have increased for the number of units serving households at or below 30% of AMI, as well as at or below 50%, or actually between 30% and 50% of AMI. An additional 2 points can be earned for developments receiving 6 or more points in the opportunity characteristics category if those developments commit to 50 years or more of affordability. The QAP does require a minimum of 40, but if 50 years is committed to, an additional 2 points can be gained for opportunity area properties. The on-site resident services coordinator category has been enhanced to award 1 point for a part-time resident services coordinator or 2 points for a full-time position. These positions still need to be evidenced by a line item in the operating budget, as well as signing the acknowledgement of resident service coordinator guidelines. In the financial efficiency and sustainability section, most of the criteria here for the points have not changed. However, the maximum number of points has decreased. And the only area in this section that has changed really is the sustainable design criteria, and that will be explained in more detail later in this presentation. In the local impact section, again, most of the criteria and the points have not changed from the previous QAP. One section that has changed is the transit-oriented development category. There are no longer points available for including a mixed-use component in the development. And points have now been added for proximity to certain amenities. So the proximity to transit criteria has not changed, and these points can still only be awarded for proximity to an existing train station or a CT fast track station. Again, being near a local bus stop does not qualify for points for proximity to transit. Now we have added points for proximity to specified amenities. 1 point is available for sites that are within 2 miles of private amenities, such as shopping centers, medical facilities, daycare centers, and things like that. Another point is available for sites within 2 miles of local bus service, public parks that contain a playground or offer other family activities as listed on a map or a website. The point can be awarded for proximity to schools, libraries, or other community recreational facilities that are the property of the municipality or the state. Both of these points can be claimed if they are applicable. It is not one or the other, both can be claimed. This section also contains a new category for a concerted community revitalization plan and or affordable housing plan. So I took this language right out of the QAP because there are 4 criteria that the plan would need to meet in order to claim these points. So the first one is, as of the preliminary application deadline under this QAP, the state, municipality, or other regional community or municipally recognized organization or group formally adopted a concerted community revitalization plan to revitalize a defined geographic area, which includes the site of the proposed development, provided, however, a standard land use or comprehensive plan will not be eligible unless it contains a specific revitalization component. So that's very important. It has to specifically contain a revitalization component in the plan. The second one is that the state, municipality, or other group that adopted the plan needs to certify that no principal of the applicant initiated the adopted concerted community revitalization plan other than a public housing authority or entity related to a public housing authority. It must be shown that completion of the proposed development would contribute to one or more of the goals in that community revitalization plan. And the fourth criteria is that the state, municipality, or other community or municipally recognized organization or group is committed to making specific investments in non-housing infrastructure, amenities, or services beyond the proposed development. The opportunity characteristics area, The points have not changed for locations in a municipality identified on the Affordable Housing Appeals Procedure List as published by DOH. The criteria to qualify for points under the development located in an area of opportunity has not changed, as far as the development still must not be age restricted and it must contain 50% or more of the total units that contain 2 or more bedrooms. The mapping tool has changed, and you will hear about that in a minute. The last section, qualifications and experience, there have been no changes to that category, the criteria, or the points associated with it. Now, I would like to ask my colleague, Jonathan Cabral, to talk a little bit about the opportunity mapping changes. John.
Great, thanks, Deb. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. So I'll briefly go over the some of the changes associated with the opportunity mapping. So I'll just give some context and history here. So DOH adopted an opportunity map several years ago for its own, to guide its own investment. Around the same time, CHFA adopted its own separate LIHTC opportunity map used to award points for developments located in communities of higher opportunity. These are higher resource communities, communities with where individuals have access to jobs, and communities with higher performing school districts. This caused a bit of confusion when applying for tax credits or even applying for funding through DOH. While the maps were similar, the maps were different and had different methodologies. Next slide, please. So again, the former map that CHFA used was based on municipal level data. So a town was given a score rather than a community, different than DOH's map, which rated communities at the census tract level. The CHFA map was binary, so you either got the points or didn't get the points, depending on how the town scored. And the points associated with the opportunity characteristics were pretty much the non-exempt communities in the 830G list. We looked at school performance, poverty level of that town, access to jobs, and proximity to community colleges. This has changed. Next slide, please. So about a year or so ago, DOH commissioned, made a commission to develop a new statewide opportunity map, similar to the one they had, but looking at newer data, looking at its methodology. At the same time, CHFA decided to adopt this new opportunity map, again, to reduce confusion and so that we were in line with DOH's policy, especially around areas of opportunity. When developing the new map, DOH worked with the Connecticut Fair Housing Center and Open Communities Alliance. They also worked with us to better develop a map that worked for everyone across the state. This map it will be a shared map between DOH and for this round and future rounds going forward. Like the other map, we're using similar data points, but again, we're doing it at the census tract level. And rather than it be primary, meaning that you either get the points or don't get the points, census tracts are rated and ranked at a state level. So there's, again, it better shows the resources communities have when you compare community to community. Here on the slide, you see how you see what data is used and how the data is broken up. The three primary buckets that we look at is a community's education, meaning school performance and median income, employment, again, access to jobs, job growth and unemployment in that community, and then neighborhood statistics, so the crime statistics, home ownership rate, and poverty level. And these are equally rated. Next slide. So here you can see some of the differences from the old CHFA map and the new opportunity statewide map. Again, on the top left corner, you see our older map, which again gave points based just on at the town level versus the census tract level, which is on the bottom right corner. Again, looking at different communities, we all know communities where certain parts of the town are different than other parts of the town, and we wanted to capture that. Again, this is an attempt to desegregate to poverty and to better understand community development at the local level, not just the municipal level. Next slide. So I just wanted to pull straight from the QAP how the points will be awarded. Again, as discussed earlier, The A30G list points, these are the non-exempt communities, still receive the 6 points if the development is located in that town. However, when it comes to the opportunity area map, it's a little bit different. In the past, we had given points based on each individual characteristic. This time, points are associated with which level the census tract is based on those criteria shown in a couple slides ago. So again, in those communities that are higher resourced with higher performing school districts, access to jobs, lower unemployment will score higher. And a map with all those census tracts can be found on our website. And like our old map, you can type in an address and the points associated with that community do pop up. Next slide. So I have here a link to our new opportunity map, which I could go over during the Q&A if someone has any questions. That's it.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, back to me. So I feel that this bears repeating many times. Applications, including all required exhibits, must be uploaded to SharePoint no later than 4 p.m. on January 12th, 2022. SharePoint sites must be requested by January 5th. And applicants should remember to mail in a non-refundable application fee to CHFA's office. The fees are different depending on for-profit applicants and nonprofit applicants. Okay, so the review process has not changed. All threshold items must be submitted for an application to be considered. There will be no official deficiency period. There's no opportunity to provide additional information or change something in the application. Applications are expected to be complete at the time of submission. However, CHFA does reserve the right to request clarification on something that may be not clear. But again, no new information is accepted following the application deadline. If we do require clarification on something, it is anticipated that those calls will take place probably late February, early March of 2022. Following the complete review and scoring of the application, points review calls will be offered to all the applicants. These are targeted to take place in early April 2022. This is subject to change. This is tentative, as this is a new timeline this year, starting in January. We do hope to present recommendations for awards to the CHFA Board of Directors at its April 28th, 2022 meeting. But again, that is subject to change. CHFA underwriting standards have not changed. We still require a 115 minimum debt service coverage ratio at year 1 and a minimum of 1.0 without the use of reserves for the full 15-year compliance period. The developer allowance / fee is still up to 15% based on the sliding scale that can be found in the CHFA procedures. Trending assumptions have not changed. It's still 2% for income, 3% on expenses. CHFA is still using its per unit operating expense range. Those guidelines can be found in the underwriting standard summary in the multifamily guideline found on the website. Please remember that the operating range amounts disclosed on that document are for the current year and should be trended forward 3% each year to verify that your expenses are within the correct range. The basic threshold requirements as outlined in the QAP, not very many of these have changed. A credible financing plan is still required. We need to see firm commitments for funding that must be submitted for all proposed sources, with the exception of the DOH funding. DOH applications will be reviewed concurrently with the 9% application. However, all other sources of funds must provide a letter of interest, a soft letter of funding, a commitment, something like that. The information that you disclose on Exhibit 6.5, the sources of funds exhibit in the CONAP, must agree with the commitment letters and/or letters of interest. The amounts should be the same and supported. Okay, 20% of the total units still need to be targeted to households above 30% of AMI and at or below 50% of AMI. A minimum of 40-year affordability is required. There are other basic threshold requirements that can be found in the QAP. CHFA will accept proposals that want to use the income averaging set aside, the minimum, I forgot what average income test, sorry. That's the official name of it. The requirements for use of this can be found in the LIHTC guidelines found on CHFA's website. Those guidelines have been updated and are found, the recent ones are on the website. CHFA does reserve the right to supersede any guidance found in those guidelines based on any IRS guidance that is issued in the future. Applicants and managing agents really need to understand the compliance challenges for using this minimum set aside, and we will require evidence that that has been considered. Okay, a qualified development team is still required. Applicants and team members must comply with CHFA's program eligibility requirements. Architects and general contractors must be licensed in Connecticut, and management companies must be approved by CHFA. If there's a question as to whether or not they already are approved by CHFA, please contact me and we can look into that for you. And if they are not already approved, there's a list of documentation they can provide for consideration. CHFA will be looking at development team capacity. Applicants are evaluated on past performance in areas as ability to meet established timelines, deviation from proposed costs, execution of proposals as originally submitted, compliance with funding program requirements, and successful operation of developments. All applicants are strongly encouraged to review the capacity of your development team members, review their past performance, maybe talk to people they've worked with before, just fully vet anyone that you're going to add to your development team. CHFA will consider hybrid financing structures. That's a combination 4% tax credit, 9% tax credit deal. These must be of a scale to produce demonstrable savings of scarce resources, as well as increase the production of affordable housing units. Applicants will need to disclose their intention to use this at the pre-application conference so it can be discussed. And there are criteria in the QAP as well as a separate hybrid financing structure guideline that outlines all of the requirements to use this. Okay, just some helpful hints on points. Supportive housing units require a supportive service plan prepared by a qualified service provider. You'll hear a little bit more about this later in the presentation, but we do not require an executed MOU with that provider, but a provider that is approved must prepare the plan. The plan must include a budget for the supportive services, and the application must demonstrate a plan for funding those services. It can be done through a pre-funded service reserve that would be included in the development budget. It could be done through the operating budget, and it must be reflected in the proposal, or a third party might offer to fund those services, in which commitment for that would be required. As a reminder, if the supportive housing units are not covered by a rental subsidy, do not assume that the tenant will have sufficient income to pay the minimum tax credit rent. We do suggest that it's safe to assume that once they're connected to services, the tenant will receive at a minimum SSI income. For 2021, it's $794 per month. It's possible it will go up for 2022. But based on this $794 number, a safe assumption for rent is 30% of that, which is $238 a month. Okay, just a reminder on other permanent funding sources. In order to qualify for points in this area, it must be a non-debt source, and it cannot be from a state administered fund or any developer funds. So state administered funds include funds from other agencies, DOH, DECD, as well as energy rebates. They don't qualify in this category either. Any non-debt commitment should be firm and quantifiable for at least 20 years. And contribution does qualify under this category, and it requires that an appraisal that is no older than 12 months from the application due date be provided. If there are any negative conditions disclosed in that report, CHFA will adjust the value downward for the cost to cure those conditions. A tax agreement with the municipality also counts in this category for points. The tax agreement must have already been approved by the municipality, and the applicant needs to provide a calculation of its value over the life of the agreement. If there are funds coming from a housing authority or a municipality, these may be counted. There is a definition of municipal resources in the glossary. The glossary has also been updated and is found on the website. In the cost effectiveness and intermediary cost effectiveness category, these costs are third-party services that are related to project development. CHFA will review the budget and determine which costs must be included in the calculation. I know there is a calculation in the CONAP. However, that calculation does not include anything that is put on a line item that is identified as other. It's not linked to those. So CHFA will review what each cost is and determine if it needs to be included in that calculation. In the priority location area, the map is still found on the OPM website. The category for mass transit station does not include a local bus stop. There is a separate category for local bus service. In order to qualify for the point there, it must be bus service that runs 7 days a week, and the bus stop must be within half a mile of the development. We have had situations where this is inaccurately reflected on the priority location map. So if there is actually bus service that qualifies, please provide us maps and schedules to evidence that it meets the criteria. And this is applicable for any of the 5 criteria. If there's something that's incorrect on the map, you can just provide us evidence and we will make the adjustment in the points. Okay, in the experience of sponsor, applicant, or general partner section, the points are awarded on the experience of the principal or the entity. We are allowing applicants that have been established as a joint venture, which includes a participant with sufficient LIHTC experience. CHFA will review that and determine that there is sufficient experience to claim the points. Evidence of material participation by the co-sponsor is always required. In the developer sponsor resource category, this is an investment in the permanent sources of funds, exclusive of deferred developer's fee and tax credit equity. These 2 items do not count here. We do require evidence that the funds are available and allocated to the development. This can be either through a letter from your accountant, a bank statement showing current balance with sufficient funds available, along with a certification that those funds will be allocated to the development, something like that. A land contribution can also qualify in this area, and similar to the other category, we do require an appraisal that is no older than 12 months from the application due date. And if there are negative conditions, the value will be adjusted downward for that. Any project-specific competitive grants, pass-through loans obtained by a developer or owner, or project cost savings cannot be used to offset the commitment of developer resources. Once this commitment is made and points are awarded, we do expect that commitment to stay in as a permanent source of funds. Okay, CHFA is once again offering taxable bond financing for use with the 9% round. We have 3 programs to offer this year. We have construction-only financing, construction to permanent financing, and permanent-only financing. Applications for letters of interest will be accepted via email with reduced documentation. The terms and list of required documents will be found on CHFA's website. If not today, then this week for sure. It's not up there yet, but it will be soon. Applicants are encouraged to explore all financing options. If you have multiple letters of financing interest, those may be included in the application for review. And as a reminder, the use of CHFA financing does not affect the review or the scoring of a 9% application. Applications, as I said, will be accepted via email to the same mailbox that the preliminary applications are going to, and those need to be in by 4 p.m. on December 7th. So the construction-only product offers a rate that is going to be fixed at 3%. This is assuming a closing by November 30th of 2022. If it does not close by that date, CHFA reserves the right to reevaluate the pricing. The term of a construction-only loan cannot exceed 24 months. Interest-only payments are due until maturity. Prepayment cannot be made until month 16. And all standard CHFA underwriting requirements apply. The construction to permanent product will utilize the 2-note structure that CHFA typically uses. There's a construction note as for the piece that will be paid off at the end of construction, and there's a permanent note for the amount that stays in permanently. These are dispersed pari passu during construction. This construction piece will also carry a rate of 3% as long as the loan closes by November 30th, 2022. The permanent loan rate is based on the 10-year Treasury rate plus 250 basis points. Again, the construction term is not to exceed 24 months. The permanent loan term is 37 years, which is 35 years plus the 2-year construction period. Interest-only payments on both notes are required during construction. Again, prepayment is also available of the construction loan at month 16, and the permanent loan payment is amortized over 35 years, and amortization commences at month 25. Prepayment of the permanent loan will be allowed in accordance with CHFA's Preservation of Housing Affordability Policy Statement. This statement can be found on the website, and it basically says that loans may be prepaid at year 15 if they are refinanced with CHFA funding, or they can be prepaid at year 20 utilizing any funding. And again, CHFA multifamily underwriting standards will apply. Okay, the permanent only product will carry a fixed rate based on the 10-year Treasury plus 300 basis points. The interest rate will be locked in no sooner than 30 days before the closing with the construction lender. The loan will have a term of 35 years. There will be one full disbursement made at payoff of the construction loan and conversion to permanent. This permanent loan closing must occur 25 months from the construction closing. If an extension to this deadline is needed, it can be extended an additional 6 months with a fee of $5,000 per month. CHFA will issue a commitment at the time of the construction closing. The loan will be sized using current rents at the time of construction closing without trending the rents forward. Commercial income may not be used to size this permanent loan. Standard fees apply. However, there's a few additional fees as well. There is a non-refundable forward standby fee of 1% of the loan amount due at construction closing. And there is a forward good faith deposit fee also of 1% of the loan amount. This is due at construction closing, but is refundable at the permanent loan closing. If for some reason the permanent loan does not close with CHFA, it will become non-refundable. And all other CHFA underwriting guidelines also apply. There are several conditions to conversion. These include an updated underwriting at the time of permanent loan closing to confirm the income, expenses, debt coverage, and size the loan if necessary. 100% qualified occupancy of LIHTC units must be achieved. The construction loan must be paid off in full. And the rest of CHFA's typical final closing conditions must be satisfied. All right, I would like to turn it over to my colleague Seema Malani to discuss the technical services guidance.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning, everybody. I'll go over the tech-related changes. So first up, like Terry mentioned, this time the classifications are preservation and new construction. So new construction is defined as production of new dwelling units in unoccupied buildings of any previous use type and new buildings. So these might typically apply to gut rehab if it's existing construction or new construction. Preservation is defined as the rehabilitation of existing occupied multifamily rental dwelling units. This classification may include construction types such as minor, moderate, and substantial rehabs, or a mix of those three. Each project will be analyzed based on the criteria listed in the QAP that Terry went over just a little while back. Scope of rehabilitation along with scope of work on a per square foot basis as demonstrated by a capital needs assessment will be analyzed, and this will be confirmed by a site visit by Chafa Tech and underwriting staff as part of the review process. Next slide. All right, so here I'll quickly go over all the tech-related points in the QAP. So the first one is category 2A, cost effectiveness for hard cost. So if the deviation is between 0 and 5%, you get 2 points. And for deviation 5 to 10%, it's 1 point. And again, note these points were 1 and 3 in the previous QAP. They've been reduced to 1 and 2. Second category is 2E, plans and specs. At 90% or greater than 90% complete would get you 1 point. It's just as it was in the previous QAP. 2F, this is where a lot of changes have happened, and I'll go over this category in detail. This is the sustainable design points category, and benchmarking with EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager is a prerequisite for any sustainable design points. And this time around, we have increased the sustainable design points from 7 max in the previous QAP to 13. We've expanded sustainable design measures to 5 subcategories: energy conservation, green building, renewables, electrification and resiliency, operations and resiliency, and sustainable development with digital literacy and connectivity. So the project teams can mix and match tiers between different subcategories. There is a lot of inbuilt synergies between these different subcategories. So essentially, if you make efforts in one subcategories, it may benefit you in other subcategories too. It is a progressive performance-based criteria such that project teams are rewarded for the sustainability efforts, and at the same time, they have the flexibility to choose the best building methodology for their project, given the nuances, budgets, and the challenges of those unique projects. So for sustainable design, under energy conservation, you could get 2, 3, or 4 points. Green building, you could get 2 or 3 points. Renewables, you could get 1 or 2 points. And then there is an additional additive point under operations and resiliency. You could get 1 or 2 points. Digital literacy and connectivity, 1 point. So the total possible points under sustainable design would be 13. Next up is 3E, historic place, adaptive reuse, or brownfield development. The category is the same and the number of points are the same as last year. So here, either it has to be a designated historic building, or it has to be a renovation or adaptive reuse of vacant or abandoned non-residential structure. And if it's a brownfield, then it should be included on a federal or a state list of brownfield site, or has been awarded brownfield cleanup funds by a federal or a state agency. So altogether, there are 19 possible points that would be reviewed by technical services. Next slide. Now I'll go over the sustainable design measures in a little more detail, since this is a category that's changed quite a bit. So this is for sustainable design measures under new construction. So this applies to projects that come under that classification. So the first subcategory is energy conservation, and the prerequisites under this subcategory are the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home Certification and balanced ventilation. It's a progressive scale with 3 tiers. The first tier is you have an average HERS index of 50 or less, or you could even have, your project could have an average below Energy Star target index of 15% or more, and this would get 2 points. For tier 2, the same measures bump up a little bit. So the average HERS index here is 46 or less, or average Energy Star target index of greater than, equal to or greater than 25%. And this would get projects 3 points. For tier 3, you could have an average HERS index of 42 or less, or you could have average Energy Star target index better, equal to or better than 35%, or it could be a passive house project, or it could be an International Living Future Institute, ILFI, Zero Energy Ready project. That will get 4 points. And something to note here is all the HERS scores here are excluding renewables. And for purposes of meeting ZERH prerequisite and tier evaluation, projects receiving historic tax credits or subject to SHPO NPS restrictions may use projected HERS rating in which the affected envelope is affected envelope assemblies are modeled according to CHAFA design standards. Next slide. The second subcategory under new construction is green building. Projects shall select the certification path appropriate to their building type. Tier 1 is the Enterprise Green Communities 2020 for 2 points, or National Green Building Standard NGBS Gold, or Leadership in energy and environmental design, LEED Gold. All three of them would get you 2 points. For tier 2, it would be NGBS Emerald, LEED Platinum, or Living Building Challenge Core Ready for 3 points. Next slide. The next subcategory under new construction is renewables, electrification, and resiliency. Again, there are 3 tiers, 2 tiers, and an additional additive point. So for tier 1, we need a PV system to offset at least 75% of the annual energy demand for site and interior common area lighting, and that would get project teams 1 point. Under tier 2, PV system to offset at least 90% of the annual energy demand for site and interior common area lighting, and it should be all electric building. The only thing that does not count here is the backup generator. In addition to all electric building, it should provide backup power to provide resiliency to critical systems, emergency lighting, and access to potable water. So tier 2 is 2 points. Additional additive point can be, projects can get additional additive points for providing all electric building and providing battery storage system or a fuel cell to serve as backup power to provide resiliency to critical systems, emergency lighting, and access to potable water. So it is the battery backup instead of a generator, gas generator. We are asking for a battery backup. The last category here is sustainable development with digital literacy and connectivity. And this is for high-speed broadband access to units, 1 point. And all these categories and their requirements are listed in detail in our guidelines. Please be sure to refer to them. They are located on CHAFA's website. Next slide. All right, now this is the second classification for preservation. So all applications applying under preservation shall propose a scope of work based on recommendation from the energy consultant for the highest levels of energy efficiencies and sustainabilities that the project can meet. So it is to the extent appropriate and practical for the proposed development. We are looking to see benchmarking with EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We want to see energy conservation and average HERS index of 70. We are looking for at least a 30% reduction in pre-rehab energy use. For green buildings, EGC, Enterprise Green Building Community, or NGBS, or LEED. Project teams may choose what works with them. PV systems to offset annual energy demand for site and interior common area lighting. This could be on-site or off-site renewables. And we want project teams to contact Connecticut Green Bank and complete a feasibility study and analysis on the ROI. Then we are looking to see backup power to provide resiliency to critical systems, emergency lighting, access to potable water, commissioning, and high-speed broadband access to units. Debbie, can you go back a slide, please? One more slide back. Under tier 2, I'm not sure if I mentioned, I may have, I missed a little bit here. I missed the operation and resiliency. So under operations and resiliency, again, there are 2 tiers. One's for owner-paid utilities to cover usage for heating, cooling, and hot water at a minimum, and commissioning. That would get you 1 point. And for tier 2, Owner-paid utilities, just like the first one, and commissioning, just like tier 1. In addition, if you have backup power to resiliency, to critical systems, emergency lighting, and access to potable water would get you 2 points. And you would note that some of these requirements are purposely aligned to get you more benefits. We really want backup to critical systems. I think this was the part I missed. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, one more. Okay, yeah, we spoke about all of these. Commissioning, high-speed broadband access, extraordinary cost is something that comes up quite a bit, and it hasn't changed much from last year, except for a few things that I will get into. So extraordinary cost, commonly considered by CHFA upon receiving detailed backup, include anything related to environmental abatement, site work exceeding 20% of the total construction cost, demolition, masonry, metals, siding upgrades, special construction, elevators, prevailing wages or Davis-Bacon wages, SHPO, NPS requirements, and others as may be identified and considered reasonable and acceptable to CHFA. You will notice that we've taken out anything related to sustainability out because we feel they've been the entire category has been compensated well in terms of points. So those will not be considered extraordinary cost adders. Next slide. For CHFA to consider extraordinary costs, we want teams to provide us good documentation. So provide us a clear breakdown of extraordinary costs above and beyond CHFA baseline costs, and an evidence to support rationale for consideration as extraordinary cost. And please note, CHFA would recognize only the portion of the extraordinary costs that it considers reasonable. And what I have here is some snapshots from our exploded trade payment breakdown. And here project teams, copied it on to another Excel document, and they provided a listing of extraordinary costs. They provided us with a rationale. They provided what portion may be extraordinary. So all that information is really useful, and it helps us determine next steps. Next slide. Some helpful hints for technical services related points. One, refer to consolidated application for threshold requirements, required application information, and time-sensitive documents like the capital needs assessment, SHPO, phase 1 environmental site assessment. And these are all noted with a letter T for threshold in the CONAP. Scope of work described in the narrative should match information on the document set, and they should jive with the construction cost presented in the exploded trade payment breakdown and the project cost summary. 3, please provide complete project data on the document set, including the number of buildings, the building gross area, total number and types of units, unit net area, total living unit area, total common area, total commercial area. This is a chart that is part of CONAP. Ideally, we would like to see the same chart being pasted on the document set. That would be really, really helpful. Exploded trade payment breakdown and project cost summary. These are tabs in the CONAP. Please be sure to provide unit costs like linear feet, square foot, each, whatever is applicable to your project, and to that item, provide the unit cost and associated quantities. Please be sure to specify costs under allowances and others. This must be supported on the information provided on the document set. Next slide. All right, the markups, the maximum markups allowed by CHFA are 6% for general requirements, 2% for overhead, and for profit or GMP fees, this is maxed out at 6%. So make sure you are under those limits. And if there's a identity of interest, these are reduced. Instead of being at 14%, they would be 11%. Construction contingency, please note, it is for unforeseen conditions only, not for errors and omissions in the document set. For new construction, we are looking to see around 5 to 8%. For rehab projects with SHPO or any environmental abatement, we want at least 10% or maybe more at CHFA discretion. Please be sure to include environmental abatement costs noted in the reports on appropriate environmental line item in the PCS and the exploded trade payment breakdown. And since these are considered extraordinary costs, if you put them in other categories, we may not be able to give you those adders. Include prevailing wages or federal Davis-Bacon as applicable, and please be sure to provide supporting rationale. All sustainable design measures should be appropriately documented in the drawings and specs, and related construction costs should be noted in the project cost summary and the exploded trade payment breakdown. Next slide. So please be sure to look at CHFA website for the latest CHFA guidelines, and refer to CHFA environmental guideline for testing requirements for hazardous materials, and provide cost estimates for remediation. And please be sure to have your LEP opine on these cost estimates. That would be critical. The phase 1 environmental site assessment should have been completed within 1 year of the application due date. If the phase 1 recommends additional testing, this testing should be done, and additional reports included in the application submission along with remediation costs. And these costs need to come from the LEP. Radon testing is needed for existing buildings. For gut rehabs and new construction, a radon mitigation system should be included in the document set, and costs should be carried in the exploded trade payment breakdown and the PCS. And once again, please be sure to look at the CHFA website for the latest version of CHFA guidelines. These will include updates related to this QAP. Thank you.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk about QA and QC a little bit. As Siba alluded to, the CHFA construction guidelines and standards have been updated as relates to the current QAP. So the QA/QC requirements are going to be outlined in a new document that's called Energy Conservation and Sustainability. Along with that, when you go on the website, you'll see that the CHFA standards have been revised, as well as the tech services review guidelines and the cost guidelines. As in the past, soft costs for all inspections, testing, and verification and certifications by appropriate consultants must be clearly identified and included in the development budget. Next. So as in the past as well, all applicants seeking energy conservation and green building category points have to provide a CONAP Exhibit 4.8E I think there'll be talk about how that has changed a little bit also as relates to this QAP. But we're going to we need to see that all of the sustainable design measures that are being proposed are reflected in the narrative, as well as the documents that are submitted, plan specs and modeling reports, checklists for green building standards, any other documents that are prepared for to document the sustainable design measures have to be included with the application as separate attachments. And also related to that, if you're seeking points in the renewals, electrification, and resiliency categories, you need an engineer's letter or report confirming the annual energy demand for the site and common area lighting and the qualifying performance of the proposed system. Next. So also, as in the past, we like to see the points be broken down in whole numbers. So the points for energy conservation and green building categories are based on the percentage of qualifying units that are provided in the application. So if you have a project that is two different categories of project, where you have new or gut plus some less than gut rehab, this is how we're going to break down the points. So if it for 2-point categories, 50% or less would get 1 point, and more than 50% would get you 2. 33% or less would get you 1 point in a 3-point category. 66 or less would get you 2, and 100%, 66 to 100% will get you 3. And for 4-point categories, similarly, we break it down 25%, 50%, and 75%, and 100%. Next. So we expect all of our applicants to be pre-certification ready if your project requires that. A couple of the green building program categories require a certification, pre-certification, or at least a review by the agency that is, or the organization that runs the program. So we're going to need that to be completed before you get a 42M letter and your initial close. So we want your applications to be ready to submit at the point that that you submit the application, so that it immediately, if you're awarded, you get those steps taken care of. And again, all of this information is outlined in the new energy conservation and sustainability guideline. And all applications that are awarded points under the energy conservation and green building design categories will be required to provide her certificates and proof of relevant certifications with the cost certification. Next. And next up is Miguel.
Miguel, are you there? I guess he stepped away. So I can talk about the DOH funding parameters. So again, this year, DOH plans to make commitments of subordinate finance.
Deb, I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Deb. Good morning, everyone. I will be hopefully brief and to the point. DOH plans to make commitments of its subordinate financing to support the 2022 9% low-income housing tax credit rounds. Awards are limited to $100,000 per qualified unit to a maximum of $4 million per project. Awards are limited to one developer / sponsor / owner. Subordinate financing is subject to the availability of funds and bond commission allocations and authorizations. We do anticipate It's a quick side note that we will be going directly to bond commission within 30 days, ideally, after the announcement of the 2022 9% round. Nonprofit sponsors of projects that include units of primarily to serve persons with disabilities, veterans, or homeless families or individuals should contact DOH to discuss their subordinate financing limit for their projects. What we would like to do to not make you have more than one meeting is that we will include this in the preliminary application discussions. And DOH will reserves the right to identifying the final funding source. So please keep that in mind as it relates to procurement and architectural standards and requirements. Applicants must submit a plan compliant with procurement requirements. Additionally, if any portion of the site is within a floodplain defined as a FEMA flood zone designation other than a B, C, or X, applicants must provide approval by the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, DEEP. Please note that they have a pre-application process that is electronically now in place that was just announced in the last 2 months. Also, if there is a levee protection, we must be aware that the levee must be active and maintained. Debt or deferred developer fees must be maximized. These amounts may be adjusted during underwriting to reduce the use of state scarce resources. Awards will not be made to development entities that have 2 or more outstanding commitments of financial closing from DOH that have not closed as of March 31st, 2022. You know who you are, and we are working with you very closely, as we know that some of you have had the impact of material cost increases. So communication will be very back and forth during these next few weeks and months. SEPA submissions must be compliant with the new 2021 standards, which means simply, if you have applied in the past and provided a SEPA and were provided a response, that is no longer valid. Think of it this way: if you did not pass go and put in an application, that SEPA approval review is dead in the water. Please contact the Department of Housing. Check our website. The new information is also available on the DAS OPM website for SEPA submissions. Applications must be submitted with for the 9% by 4 p.m. on January 12th, 2022. We are not running a separate application review process. Applications for the 9% will be reviewed concurrently. We also hope to be assigning project managers as part of the review process, so that we have underwriting and project management running concurrently. There will not be a deficiency period. If necessary, clarifications of information will be requested simultaneously with clarifications for 9% low-income housing tax credits. Gracias.
Thanks, Miguel. Is Steve here to talk about supportive housing?
If he is not, I'm not sure if he's on mute, but
I see him.
No, I am here. Just had to unmute myself as well as put on my camera and obviously fix my camera. So thank you, CHFA, for this opportunity to present upon our continued collaboration related to supportive housing, and thanks to everybody who has presented to this panel so far today. So DOH is still committed to providing or coordinating with CHFA to ensure that our homeless households have opportunities for permanent housing through the low-income housing tax credit project. We have made presentations on this before, so we're going to continue that commitment going forward. As we all know, Connecticut has been divided into 7 coordinated access networks throughout the state. This is where any developer who's interested in providing an application to QAP can reach out to find willing providers that would match any available units with support services. So our coordinated access agencies have been working for years to do this, and it is the clearest way to get in touch with folks as well as to receive referrals. So anytime there is an opportunity when there is a vacancy that occurs in any of these projects, the best way to get those things filled would be to contact your local contact at the Coordinated Access Network. If anybody needs any assistance with obtaining that information, please let me know. I can certainly get that I can get that information to you quite easily. We also have a wide variety of households that can meet the eligibility requirements, from individuals to families. So the only thing that we need is just that documentation of what type of unit that needs to be filled. And from there, we would be able to provide the necessary referrals to any project that is needed. And we can move to the next slide. And here are contact manager or contact information for our coordinated access managers. Bo is more of a data person, but if anybody has any questions, they should go directly to Lee. She manages programs in the following areas. She manages the New Haven community, as well as the Northwest, the Waterbury community, as well as the eastern half of the state and Middletown Meriden, whereas Kara manages the Hartford community, the central, which is New Britain, Bristol, as well as Fairfield County. And we can go on to the next one. And this is sort of the referral processes that we're looking for. I think over the course of the past 5 or so years, as these projects have come up online, we've learned some important steps that make this process a little bit easier. So the earlier that we get the information about when these projects are going to open is the better, so that we were able to identify who may be eligible for the properties, to make sure that we know what the eligibility requirements are. Clearly, like I stated before, our coordinated access agencies have a wide variety of folks that are in their system that need housing. So it really is just about how we can best match what the development is looking for compared to what the individuals that we have on our list. So if we just know where the development is located, as well as the owner developer and specifically the property manager and that individual that will be accepting the referrals a few months before, we can really start that process to ensure that all the developers have access to eligible clients or eligible tenants for these households. I think over the few years we have been able to move down through some of our target populations. As you can see, chronically homeless individuals and families. We've been able to really make a pretty significant progress in reducing the numbers of both chronically homeless and families. So we are happy to continue this collaboration, and noting that we can also move on to other populations that may not exactly meet just a chronic homeless target, because we really do have very few that are left to be unmatched in the state. And as well, with a lot of the funding that we received due to the CARES Act and the American Recovery Act, as a result of COVID, we've received a wide variety of housing resources that has also been able to be used to house additional households. So we are certainly making progress, and one of the big reasons for this is our partnership here with the QAP. I know some of the issues that have come about really have been as related to service dollars, and I think that has been the biggest concern that we have noted here at the department, and we are actively engaging with our partners as well as other funding entities to determine how best to fund these projects, so that we can certainly ensure that we are providing service dollars as well to make these projects run quite effectively and efficiently. And also, I know we also have expanded our eligibility requirements for supportive housing to other state agencies. So it's not just DOH and the DEMIS project for homeless, though I know that DDS will also be presenting on this call about some of their priority populations for their population, as well as additional state agencies that we're trying to engage to ensure that we continue to provide as many tenants as possible for these projects. So once again, communication is important to this. It really is just about how best we can share information going forward so that we can get you the units that you need. And if there's any questions or concerns related to DOH's commitment or DOH's processes, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. And I did mention what the how our state is broken up into those 7 coordinated entry networks. And here you can actually see a map of it. And like I said earlier, Lee is in charge of the Eastern, the Meriden, Middlesex, Wallingford, as well as the New Haven and Northwest areas, whereas Kara controls the Hartford, Central, and Fairfield County areas of the state. And we can go on to the next slide. And there are just a list of towns for developers who are interested in knowing which community or which coordinated entry network their project lies in. That previous slide showed that. And here's just a little dictionary for some of the used terms that we have here. So when you're talking to our folks, it'll make it a little bit easier for you to understand our world. Clearly, we also have one of these for the developers world, because I know there's a lot of terms that I still am getting familiar with. But certainly when you hear COC and BNL, you may not have any idea what that may mean. So this will clearly be a good resource for you so you can understand when you're talking to your CAN providers, when they start mentioning some of these things, you'll have a better understanding of what they're talking about. And some of the important ones are the BNL, which is the by name list, and that is where the coordinated entry network draws its referrals from. So that's an important piece from us. The other sources that we have, the COC, which is the continuum of care, that is really the system that we're tapping into today as HUD has applications out to really look to provide service dollars for these projects. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that going forward. And next slide. And with that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Tawny.
All right, I'm here. Thanks, Steve. All right, my name is Tawny Pham, Housing Specialist at the Department of Housing. So thank you everyone for sticking with us. I know it's a lot of information to digest, and as you know, we peel back each layer, I hope the information is helpful to you. Certainly that's what I'm here to do today, to share with you information about the Section 8 Project-Based Rental Assistance Program, or we'll simply call it CT 811, or I'll even cut it down to just 811 as I reference the program. So I've been talking about this program at this info session probably about, I think, the last 5 or 6 years. But this year, I'm excited to let you know a little bit more about the program as we work to tie the program a little more closely with the QAP and supportive housing guideline. So I'll get into those details. But nevertheless, throughout the years, this program works really great alongside the tax credit program. Most of the projects in the state, I believe, as well as in the country, because this program is available in quite a few other states around the country, the program is layered mostly into tax credit projects. So you'll see why in a moment. So CT 811 is a federal project-based rental assistance program for persons with disabilities. And it's a program, although it's administered by the Department of Housing as the lead grantee. This program is a partnership. It's an interagency partnership that also involves the help of CHFA, DSS, DMIS, as well as OPM. So if you've heard of just the Section 811 program or 811 PRAC, this is a different iteration of 811 in that it is strictly a project-based rental assistance program. So the rental assistance subsidies can provide subsidies for up to the gross rent, for gross rent up to the applicable HUD FMR. And we're excited to share that in August of 2020, last year, DOH was awarded just under $7 million from HUD for this program. And that's actually our second grant of the 811 program. We had fully encumbered our fiscal year 13 grant, and we're excited to be awarded a second round of funding. Department of Housing is currently accepting applications for 811 projects on a rolling basis. We finally did get our contract from HUD, and we'll now have the opportunity, after we do some technical review of the agreement and get that signed, we can start reviewing applications for selection, and providing letters of intent. So in a nutshell, we are in search of new construction, rehab, or existing projects with adequate turnover. So really, it's your full gamut of possibilities for eligible properties. Next slide, please. All right, so I'll let you know a little bit more about the project requirements, what it entails if you do have a rental assistance contract for the 811 program. The assistance is limited to no more than 25% of the project. A big component of the 811 program is the concept of community integration. Therefore, once you have 811 assistance in your project, it is limited to just 25% of the entire project. The contract document is what's called the Rental Assistance Contract, or a RAC, and that agreement is between the Department of Housing and the owner. And the terms of the contract is for 20 years. With that 20-year contract, there is a requirement of a recorded use agreement for a minimum of 30 years. Funding availability is in 5-year cycles subject to congressional appropriations. So that award I mentioned that DOH received last year of just under $7 million. That is the initial 5-year funding cycle. So once you're under contract, after that initial 5-year period, the assistance is subject to, again, congressional appropriations, but I am aware that there is a lot of funding being pushed to the 811 program, and that all the additional funding will be on renewal cycles. Davis-Bacon labor standards do apply since it is a federal project or a federal program, and it applies to projects with 12 or more of the 811 PRA units. Uniform physical condition standards, which requires inspections at least every 3 years. Being that, if it is a tax credit project, you are already subject to, the physical inspection. So typically we're not requiring any additional inspection requirements, but the standards are the same. And like I said, at least every 3 years. Environmental reviews, if you're familiar with the state's environmental review requirements, they are just as stringent, if not more, than the federal requirements. Of course, I'm sure there are some additional NEPA requirements associated with the federal contract, but those reviews are required for any new and existing properties. The only properties that are exempt are completed projects that are HUD assisted or HUD insured. Next slide, please. So eligible multifamily properties, and essentially which projects can take on the 811 program. Again, any new or existing property with at least 5 units and is owned by a housing authority, nonprofit, or private entity. So 5 or more units being that definition, that federal definition of a multifamily project. Development costs can be paid with any public or private resource except for Section 202 and Section 811 capital advances. And the next bit will explain to you why those resources in particular preclude those developments. So projects that are not eligible are any projects with units receiving long-term operating subsidies in the last 6 months, such as a Section 8 project-based assistance. Again, that's just seen as already receiving a subsidy, therefore it cannot receive additional project-based assistance. And any properties with senior restricted units or units that already have restricted use for persons with disabilities. So that senior restricted units usually goes along with that Section 202 resource. And again, the original Section 811 or 811 PRAC program is associated with that use restriction for persons with disabilities. We do have some preferred features when we're looking for placement of 811 subsidies into the projects. These are not required, but again, like I said, they're preferred simply as we look to match these units with our targeted populations. Things that are very much similar to what we're looking, I'm sure what the 9% applications are looking for. So units that are near public transportation and community services. We do in particular prefer efficiency and 1-bedroom units, again, simply because we are mostly working with individuals that are qualified for the subsidy. Larger units can be considered there just is a preference for more of the efficiency or one-bedroom units. Accessible or adaptable units are a great feature because, again, we're working with populations with disabilities, so having that ability to adapt the units is most helpful. And then the last feature being something that is of good importance for me, in that I work very often directly with property management agencies to administer this program. And that's having a management agency with federal project-based and HUD systems experience. That's not to say that if a management agency does not have experience, that we wouldn't be considering it, because I've certainly worked with properties with agents that, you know, we do walk through the entire project-based system and administration of the program. But this program is more of an administrative lift for the management agency. If in talking with this program, your thoughts are kind of swaying to other subsidy programs, such as the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, or even the state's WRAP program, where those are floating subsidies, and much of the administration of that program is handled by either a local housing authority or even the state subcontractor or the state contractor, John D'Amelia and Associates. That type of program, again, those administrative responsibilities are often shifted to those third-party agencies. However, with the 811 program being project-based, I'm working as the contract administrator directly with management agencies to administer the program. So that's things like the recertification process, as well as the admissions process for eligible 811 tenants. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so I'll talk a little bit more about eligible 811 tenants. So in other words, if you were to take on this program at your property, who would you be looking to house? So the eligible households are extremely low income individuals and also small families with at least one individual with a qualifying disability and is between the ages of 18 and 62. So your extremely low income ELI households are those who are at or below 30% AMI. And you'll see there, I talked earlier about the restriction on senior restricted units, seeing that this program is only eligible for those up to the age of 62. So it's not meant for elderly housing. However, of course, tenants can age in place. So for example, if someone is 61 the day they move in, they turn 62 the next day, that's perfectly fine. They can age in place and still continue to receive that assistance. Age is only reviewed at initial certification. We do assist 3 specific target populations under this program. It's a effort that's in coordination with Department of Housing and our interagency partners that I listed earlier at CHFA, DSS, DMIS, OPM. The 3 target populations that we work with also help devise our referral system. So the 3 populations are, first, people who are experiencing homelessness or chronic homelessness through the state's coordinated access network. So that's all the great things that Steve just talked to you about. There is, that direct match of the same target populations that you're mostly familiar with working with the CANs, as they are also involved with the 811 program and the referral process as well. The second population group are persons that are participating in the state's Money Follows the Person program, who are currently institutionalized. So those are people, for example, who are in nursing homes looking for that community placement and having their own home, own rental out in the community. And lastly, it's a small group, but we also assist persons who are eligible for services under DSS's approved 1915C waiver for persons who are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Again, that's a small group, but they have a great need for specific locations throughout the state. So with this group and as well as the other 2, we are looking for locations that match to the needs of our specific target populations. So as I mentioned, this is part of a referral process. So once you have 811 assistance or under contract for 811 assistance at the property, those units are set aside for these 3 target populations. And through a referral process coordinated by DOH and the other agency partners, we refer applicants for application to those specific set-aside units. So, the good thing is for the supportive housing units, you're not having to worry about the marketing or coordination of looking for eligible applicants, because that is the role of 811 and our partners to find those qualified tenants to refer to the units for you. I always emphasize that they are referrals, so certainly they're referred with the eligibility of the 811 assistance. Nevertheless, they're still subject to the property's screening process and tenant selection plan. So long as you're adhering to your TSB and fair housing statutes, you certainly can still decide whether that applicant or household is suitable and eligible for the unit. Another great thing about the 811 referrals is that they are connected to support services. So this can include anything from housing coordination to security deposit assistance, as well as community-based long-term care services. Again, as Steve mentioned earlier, there is that connection to services for the state's coordinated access networks. We are looking to make that connection more robust through partnership with our different agencies. And then for the other two population groups that are managed by the Department of Social Services, they are under Medicaid waivers. So that is a clear connection between their need for services and the ability to fund those services using those Medicaid waivers. Next slide, please. All right, and so how the 811 program ties with the QAP, as Debbie laid out the point structures earlier, there is a section for rental for affordability, which includes two subsections that tie with the 811 program. So first being the supportive housing units. What you'll see when you review the latest iteration of the supportive housing guideline is there is a clear distinction that participation in the 811 program shall be deemed equivalent to inclusion of traditional supportive housing. So we're calling it traditional supportive housing, but what it really is the supportive housing model that you all are most likely familiar with, as we've been working with that model with a few tweaks in here and there, but that's essentially been the model under the supportive housing guideline for many years. And so the 811 program, as I said, is considered a direct equivalent to electing to do the traditional supportive housing model, simply because you are still setting that commitment for supportive housing, but you are just getting that additional support of rental assistance as well as connection to supportive housing services with those referrals from the 811 program. Okay, and secondly, households at or below the 30% AMI. Again, that is part, a commitment to have deep income targeted units. It's aligned with the 811 program because, again, eligibility for 811 assistance in terms of eligible households is restricted to households at or below 30% AMI. So you have that alignment for affordable housing at the 30% AMI level already when you have that commitment to 811. Next slide, please. And again, you'll see the inclusion of the language on the 811 program more explicitly in the supportive housing guideline, which is a supplemental guide to the QAP. The specifics of 811 mentioned in the supportive housing guideline is that participation in 811 requires a minimum commitment of 10% and a maximum commitment of 25%, again, because that is the HUD restricted 25% limit under the program. The typical service funding service plan requirements that you see under the traditional supportive housing model are not applicable with the participation in 811 program. Again, to reiterate, simply because 811 referrals are already tied with a service funding and service plan upon referral to the program. 811 projects are subject to HUD's management and occupancy review. It differs quite a bit from monitoring for, say, a qualified service provider under the traditional supportive housing model. The management and occupancy review are mostly review of the administrative and management procedures of the property, ensuring that the management and occupancy guidelines are in compliance with HUD requirements. Next slide, thank you. How to apply for the 811 program. So I know a lot of properties and a lot of developers have approached me about inclusion of or need for project-based rental assistance into their applications. So we are aware of that need and understand that you're looking for this type of commitment in advance of your submissions for tax credit applications. So to apply for the 811 funding, you would need to submit a 811 project application. It is available on the Department of Housing website, or you have my contact information below on the slide if you would like to request a copy of the application. It is, a pretty straightforward application that lays out the development that you have, the timeline of the project, the such things as the location, the management agency that's tied with the project, as well as other requirements like understanding if you are subject to environmental reviews or Davis-Bacon labor standards. So once we review those project applications, again, those are accepted on a rolling basis. And if selected for participation, the project owner enters into what is called an agreement to enter into a rental assistance contract, or called an ARAC. It's almost like a pre-contract, a pre-rental assistance contract. So LIHTC applicants selected for participation in 811 can include those, the executed ARAC or a similar, an equivalent letter of intent from Department of Housing with your submissions to CHFA. The ARAC, what it specifies that upon acceptable completion of the project, whether it's new construction or preservation, the owner and DOH will then enter into the full Section 811 rental assistance contract, or REC. And that is for the purpose of making assistance payments to enable eligible households to occupy units in the project. So again, we are very mindful of that January deadline for tax credit applications and are looking to accept applications for review and selection for placement of those 811 subsidies. Our, like I said, our grant, which was just under 7 million, is expected to generate roughly 100 units, depending on, again, on the market and the market and the rent levels being requested and awarded with each application. So my contact information is below if you need any additional information. And of course, I'm available for Q&A later on the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Tani. Just one thing, is there a deadline by which you should receive an application in order to have that letter for January 12th?
Good question. So I would say there needs to be at least a 30-day turnaround on that application in order for us to provide a letter of intent. So being that those applications are due mid-January, we're looking at a mid-December deadline for project applications.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for asking that.
Now Josh is up next to talk about supportive housing for DDS clients.
Hi, thanks so much. And thank you for inviting me. I'm pleased to be here today with my colleagues. And I know that we all share lots of common goals. So one of the things that's most important to the Department of Developmental Services, partnering with individuals and their families to provide lifelong supports and planning, and working with people to live full lives integrated in their community. Next slide, please. So towards the end of helping people live full lives integrated in their community, traditionally we had a group home model, which is on this chart. You can see CLA. It's kind of like the tallest item on that chart. And then we have some continuous residential supports and some public supports that we provide, and some companion home, which is like an adult foster care. But our biggest area of growth is this one circled IHS. It's in-home supports. And we have about 2,500 people that are receiving in-home supports in their family and very commonly in their own home or apartment. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how we're trying to shift from the traditional model to the integrated in-home support model. Next slide, please. So DDS has been really very fortunate to have been invited to participate in the Interagency Committee on Supportive Housing. We also recently participated in the CHESS Medicaid Housing Supports Planning Team, and in the past have participated in the Governor's Task Force on Housing and Supports for Vulnerable Populations. Prior to joining, we didn't know a lot about the world of supportive housing outside of what we were doing, which was the in-home supports. And DDS does manage a rental assistance program ourselves. And at the same time, we're looking to expand these programs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. So the goals are to expand access to integrated, affordable, supportive housing, strengthen linkages between housing and service providers, support the move from the institutional care model, aggregate living settings, to living as full members of the community, and to demonstrate the effectiveness of smart home and other assistive technologies to allow people that traditionally may not have been able to live independently to live full independent lives. Next slide, please. And then to expand on those goals, we're really trying to reduce the number of folks living in these aggregate or congregate settings through choice, not through forcing people to move, but by offering a greater menu of options and supports for people. We're also implementing assistive technology strategies, and this meets several needs for our support population. These can improve outcome, increase independence, help people maintain health and safety, and decrease overall reliance on paid staff. And that doesn't mean let's get rid of paid staff. It just means let's pay them for really meaningful interactions with us, not because someone had to be there to give us a med or help us warm up our coffee in the microwave or something like that. And also to increase the number of individuals supported while decreasing per person support costs. So DDS has a waiting list. We don't get enough funding to meet the needs of all the people that want services, and rebalancing and shifting from costly congregate care settings to integrated, lower cost, higher outcome settings is really desirable for us. Next slide. What do people that are supported by DDS need and want? And I think the same thing as everybody. That's what I really say. They want safe and affordable supportive housing, easy access to transportation, community and work opportunities near where they live. Shared mixed use and community space is wonderful. Inclusion and participation and accessible or accessible ready housing. Next slide. What do we look for in our providers? So DDS has about 150 or so qualified providers, and our providers are qualified for different services. Many of them are qualified to provide these in-home supports. So if you're a developer and you're looking to partner with a DDS provider, you'd want to pick a provider that's qualified to provide in-home supports. They have to be enrolled as a Medicaid performing provider in good standing with DDS with active certification status. Those providers need to be willing to use innovative approaches to deliver community-based supports and partner with the housing developer. Next slide. And key elements that we look for are, equal to or below 25% of the total units in a larger development. We don't want to see an overabundance of individuals in one setting. We want them to be part of that community. We want a person-centered living and environment and an economy of scale and service delivery. So by being able to locate 10 to 15 or so individuals who are receiving services in a development, that does offer an economy of scale for our providers. We are already doing that outside of new development, and we're bringing that into new development. On-site staffing availability, the availability to age in place. So this goes to, we're talking about accessibility and accessible ready, not only aging, but just changing needs. We all have them, and we want people to be able to remain successful where they are. A continuum of supports to meet the people's needs as they change, and then a really strong provider-developer relationship. And I guess there's another person in the middle there, or part of the circle, which is the property manager often. Thanks. Next slide, please. So in terms of funding considerations, in the past, we had received one dedicated funding allocation for our IDASH program. And now we're no longer, we're beyond that program, and we've expended the funds, and we're participating in the low income housing tax credit, which is wonderful. Rental assistance. Rental assistance is typically state agency or housing agency funded, project-based or resident-based, and service funding is typically new waiver service funding, meaning new funding, or existing recycled or portable funds. And that means recycled is funding from people who no longer want or need that funding, and portable means people can choose their provider, so they can move their money and move their supports. And of course, for the purposes of this discussion, we're talking about project-based low-income housing tax credit, project-based rental assistance that would be managed through John D. Amelia and Associates. Thank you. Next slide, please. So our recent efforts, we've been, again, very fortunate, and through the support of many of the folks that are on this call here today, and the developer community as well, and our providers. So we had 20 million in capital development, and we were able to participate in 3 developments through the IDASH program. And that was really establishing the need and the feasibility of the work with the DDS population. And now that that is established, we're looking for sustainability, ongoing projects through the low-income housing tax credit process. And so far, since 2019, there have been 3 awarded developments that we have individuals with supports that will be in those developments. Next slide, please. So thank you again for your time. Thanks to everyone who presented before me and who will come after me. I appreciate presenting with you today. If anyone needs more information about how to find a provider for DDS or anything that I talked about, please feel free to reach out and contact me. My name is Joshua Scalora. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Marina and Todd from the State Historic Preservation Office.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and I just want to say, thank you to all of our other presenters. You guys all do an awesome job. So I'm Todd Levine, and I'm an architectural historian for the State Historic Preservation Office.
And I'm Marina Wisniewski, preservationist for the State Historic Preservation Office. And we are here to discuss regulatory compliance as it applies to SHPO when you apply for CHAPA programs.
So normally we would give an overview of our process and wait to see if there are any questions. But we thought we'd take this opportunity to answer the questions we get asked most often up front, such as, who are you and why do we have to talk to you?
Slide. Thanks. But before we get there, I want to highlight what our priorities in the process are. There are 2 major things. 1, preserve historic fabric. 2, do so while encouraging an efficient review process. So that begs the first common question.
Next slide.
Nope, it's this slide.
This is on this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is historic? Oh, there it is, says it right there. What is historic fabric? So fun fact, historic fabric is not just where George Washington slept, although you may not know that he slept around a lot.
Slide.
Now next slide. There we go. All right. So all these photos here are examples of historic fabric. So historic fabric is what makes up historic resources, which for regulatory purposes are properties that are either listed on the State Register for Historic Places or the state or national register of historic places, or determined by our office to be eligible for listing on the state or national register for historic places. So remember that phrase, eligible for listing. So they come in all shapes and sizes and from different time periods. They can be individual properties like the New London Lighthouse there in the middle. or they could be a district, like on the bottom left, that's Litchfield Center, or they could be archaeological resources, which means underground, or they could be objects, like the orange steggy there on the right. That's an art piece in Hartford. So speaking of which.
Slide. It's time to answer another common question. Why do I have to talk to you? Slide. Short answer, it's the law, or rather several laws. Slide, please. The National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 established a multifaceted approach to recognizing and protecting our shared history. As part of this, a process of review was established under Section 106 of the Act, which requires that any project necessitating federal action, be it funding, permitting, property transfer, or others, evaluate how that action will impact historic resources. Connecticut has a similar law, the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, which requires that any project that utilizes state or federal funds or permitting to consider its effect to historic resources. The State Historic Preservation Office, that's us by the way, or SHPO since it's easier, was also created as part of the National Historic Preservation Act and conducts these reviews based on information submitted. In order to ensure a timely and thorough review, we have created a form to help. Slide.
All right, so this is our project notification form. This is how you submit a review. It's available on our website, which is ct.gov/historic preservation. Reviews must be sent in hard copy to the address on the form. And right now, we're also accepting digital copies emailed to us, but the hard copy still must be submitted for record retention. So the form is pretty straightforward and includes such information as location of the project, who's proposing the project, which SHPO calls the project proponent, scope of the project, and what state or federal agencies are involved. Now, this last point is very important. Knowing where your permits or funding are coming from helps us know under which laws this project is being reviewed. So for CHAFA applicants, you already know the agency and you know which program you're applying for. As part of your funding package, you may also have HUD funding. So that would be reviewed under Section 106, which is a different law. So HCCC is a state program, so it's reviewed under SEPA. If you don't know, ask the agency you're applying to, but when in doubt, just send it in. It's also very important that you complete the form. Incomplete forms delay the process because we have to try to figure out what you're doing and why. So note the big red box that's outlining a section on the form called project description. This space is for a quick summary of the project. You will probably not be able to describe the entire project within that box, but that's okay because that's not what it's for. It's to give us a general idea to understand what you guys are doing. So for instance, if it's new construction of a 4-story building, we need to know, is it rehabilitation of an old mill? Please do not put C attached. I promise we're going to look at everything. But when we vet these, when they first come in, we look at that first. And if there's something like, there's archaeological stuff that's on it and it's noted there, we know to bring this form to our archaeologist. Otherwise, it's going to sit in the pile until we get to it. So it's really important that you guys fill it out as well as you can. The attachments that go along with the form should be anything that you have that will help us understand the project. If you have drawings of renovation work, include that. If you are building new on an open parcel, include the soil map. So again, we know if there are any potential archaeological deposits. The more you can share with us, the more likely it is we don't have to ask for more information. Speaking of which, it's important that you plan ahead and allow enough time for the project to be reviewed. I'm literally sitting here reviewing these while I'm waiting for us to go. And I got a review that's dated October 1st, which means we didn't get it to October 3rd or 4th. He's like, I need this back by October 20th for the deadline. So, it's really important, guys, that you don't do that because A, if we get too many of them, they're not going to get done, right? And B, we do 3,000 of these a year, Marina and I, not just CHAFA, but for HUD and for other SEPA and Section 106. If you don't plan ahead, you may miss out. Generally, it takes 30 days for a fully completed application. So if you have all the stuff we asked for, then it'll take 30 days. If you don't, it may take longer.
So the next most common question, when do I hear back from you? If you filled out the form correctly and we have all the information we need, you can expect a letter from us within 30 days. So with the CHAFA process, we've built in extra time in case there are more questions to make sure that you're able to meet your CHAFA deadline. Because as we have heard, actually both from CHAFA and DOH, there's no deficiency period, there's no chances, there's no extras, that's that. So we want to make sure that if you're talking to us, you talk to us early on, we can get you that letter that we issue, and you can have it to bring and put in your application. So normally we do mail these, but due to COVID, we're sending electronic letters to help expedite reviews. And I did see a question in the chat. We ask that you mail in that paper copy, but you can email us a digital copy so we can get started on that review now. Slide, please. The letter has 4 possible outcomes or determination of effect. The first one, which is 90% of what our letters say, is no historic properties affected. This means exactly what it says. There aren't any historic properties that will be impacted by the project, and you're good to go. The second one is no adverse effect. This means there is a historic property that will be affected, but nothing that would negatively impact its historic fabric. The third possible outcome is a conditional no adverse effect. This means that there is a historic property and that the majority of the project won't negatively impact the resource. There are 1 or 2 items of the project scope that should be modified to avoid harming the resource. An example of this could include retaining rather than replacing architectural trim, using a more compatible material for a new addition, reconfiguring parking so it doesn't disturb archaeological resources, or other very project-specific items. Conditional no adverse effects are usually issued after we've reached out and spoken with the project proponent. This is a way for us to get you a letter without having to resubmit the project and to help keep the process moving. The last possibility, which neither we nor the project proponent want, and the one that no one wants, is adverse effect. An adverse effect is found when an undertaking, quote, may alter directly or indirectly any of the characteristics of a historic property that qualify the property for inclusion in the National Register in a manner that would diminish the integrity of the property's location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, or association. For state-funded projects, this definition also applies to state registered properties. It's a long definition, but it basically means a project that will harm a resource. Slide.
All right, so what if the finding is an adverse effect? Bad news, everyone. It means you got to talk to us more. So we have to legally resolve the adverse effects. So it must be resolved.
Slide.
Yeah, so there are 3 ways that we resolve an adverse effect: avoidance, minimization, and mitigation. So avoidance is always where we start. We always, and anybody who's worked with our office knows, we always start with how can you avoid it? How can you do something different that doesn't damage the historic fabric? You know, if you're proposing a demo because you want to build new on a spot, is there a different place you could do it? If you're proposing to replace, you know, historic windows, don't do it. Find another way. Keep the historic windows, rehab them instead of replace. Avoidance, that's where we always start and where we're going to put the most time and pressure on you guys to find a way to do so. If you know you're going to have a problem with us, avoid it by knowing upfront we're going to come at you and try to find an alternative. The second option is minimization, which is simply how can we minimize a project? This is very project specific and case by case. It doesn't often work. It's only for instance, if you were going to rehab a house and you wanted to, you know, put an addition and you were able to minimize the size of the addition so that it works. Or if you wanted to knock down a house, but instead just knock down the porch, for instance, you're minimizing the adverse effect. And then the final one is mitigation. Now, mitigation is where you compensate the community in a impactful and meaningful way for the loss. And obviously, we don't want to get there. We want to try to find a way to save the building. So mitigation usually hurts a lot. So if we have to mitigate, expect it to hurt.
So that first option, avoidance, is actually pretty easy to do if you follow the earlier advice to plan ahead. Part of that is to be cognizant of what resources you have at the outset. There's actually a book on how to do it, the Secretary of Interior's Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties. The standards is your manual for how to treat historic properties and is free. So download a copy at mps.gov/TPS/standards. Slide. But wait, there's more. Tell them, Todd.
That's right, Marina. In addition to the standards, you have a free resource in us. If you know you're going to be applying to state or federal programs, feel free to reach out to us early and often. The earlier you get in touch with us, we're happy to chat with you. We're happy to provide you with the information you need early so that when you actually do send in the paperwork, it's easy.
I truly enjoy talking about this, people, so please ask any questions you want.
That's right, because SHPO loves people. We're not here just for the resource. We love you guys. We love people. So we can help you identify if there's a resource in your project and how best to treat it within the larger scope. Again, reaching out to us early helps us streamline the review and make sure you stay on track.
If we could hold this slide. So in addition to reaching out to us directly, there are other resources that you can access to gain more information on any historic property in your project area. Digitally, the National Archives holds all National Park Service (NPS) records up to 2012 for all properties that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Our office has a spreadsheet of all properties that are listed on both the National and State Register of Historic Places that are in the lower 4 counties up to 2017. We are also, and I'm very excited, in the process of digitizing all of our historic resource records. So you'll only have to visit one site fairly soon. But for now, for anything that doesn't fit within those digital parameters, you can request to view our paper files. Normally, we're very flexible regarding researchers, but since access to our office is still limited, it may take some time to schedule an appointment. Our office also administers several financial incentive programs for the rehabilitation of historic properties, including the Federal Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program and the State Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program, which offer a 20% and 25% credit on eligible expenses, respectively, and they can be combined. Some of you may have used them on other projects. And as a bonus, projects that include an affordable housing component get an extra 5% credit on the state tax credit program. The work has to be pre-approved, which fits right into that plan ahead guidance. Properties to take advantage of these programs must also be listed. So check out the MPS and SHPO database, or feel free to reach out to us. Again, we love this stuff. So we've thrown a lot of information at you in a very short amount of time. So let's recap with a checklist you should all keep in mind. Reach out to us early.
That's right, folks. This is perhaps the most important point.
And not a month before you're supposed to close.
Yes, that's right. Not 2 weeks before you're supposed to close. Not 2 weeks.
Check to see if you already have a historic resource in your project scope.
Either through the databases or reach out to us directly.
Oh, if we can move up a couple slides. Consider if the project will utilize historic tax credits or other incentives.
If you are, be sure to read the requirements on our website at ct.gov/historic preservation.
Fill out the project notification form.
I think I've said it 4 times now, but I'll say it again. Don't put "see attached." Give us some information, please.
I don't know how many times you said it, but that's okay. Math is hard. Compile any ancillary documents.
Yeah, give us everything you think that would be helpful and anything you don't want us to have to ask you for later.
Mail in a hard copy.
The address is on the last slide.
And supply additional information if requested.
Yeah, if you do everything above, we won't need to ask you for additional information, and you would have saved yourself a step. And you don't want to hear from us. I know you guys don't. You don't want to be like, hey, this is Todd, I need this, and then you got to wait weeks. So let's all work together so that we can smooth out this process. So thanks for everybody being so attentive. And I know that there's a portion of this at the end for questions. So I guess we'll be on for that. Also, you have our contact info right there. So you can reach out to us anytime. As Marina said, we love talking to folks because SHPO loves people. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Good to have an entertaining presentation toward the end. Next up is Chris Pollock to talk about SharePoint and the consolidated application.
All right, so we'll go through this relatively quickly because most of this should be somewhat familiar. If this whole process is new to you and you've never sent in an application with CHFA or DOH before, by all means, feel free to reach out to me afterwards or at some point and let me know if you have any questions about this. So first I'll talk about SharePoint, some of the features that are in SharePoint. There's a checklist or a task list that has built-in checkboxes. There's a consolidated application that's built right into the template of the SharePoint site. So you can use that to submit your application or use it as a reference point. There's also a reference library, which includes all the additional templates, fillable forms, instructions, and other blank versions of the consolidated application. So what SharePoint is, it's an application-specific website that allows you to share the site with an unlimited number of team members, so that way multiple people can work on the file uploads or the application all at once. How to get access to SharePoint? So you would send an email to applicationrequest@chfa.org, providing some basic information. So in this case, it would be for the 9% LIHTC round. The applicant name, so what you're calling your project, the company name, and some basic contact information. Each application request will require a separate email to be sent. So if you have multiple applications you're going to be submitting, you would have to send in separate requests for each one. Give us a couple of days to set up the website. And then once the website is created, you should receive an email with an invitation to get access to the site. And to log in, you would use a Microsoft account. And if you haven't already had one set up, you can get a new one created when you're setting up your SharePoint account. The task list that's built into SharePoint, basically it just shows a quick list of tasks that are associated with the application. They can be assigned to team members. They can provide a timeline of what's going on. You can add things, you can remove them. Really, you can customize it if you wanted to. Most people just sort of use it as a way of submitting their application, because once you check off all the different items that are in the task list, it'll automatically lock your application. You don't have to do this because your site will automatically lock on the deadline at 4 o'clock. However, if you wanted to submit it earlier, you can still check off all the checkboxes in this section and it'll lock your website ahead of time. This is just sort of a screenshot of what the checklist looks like, but we can skip to the next slide. So the consolidated application workbook, it's a big, long Excel spreadsheet that we use to collect all the information that we need to review for these applications. There's a template of it built into SharePoint, and you can either edit it and save it directly to the website, or you can download it onto your individual device, fill it out there, and then make sure you upload it back onto SharePoint prior to the submission time. Or if you wanted to fill it out ahead of time and have it completely separate from SharePoint for a while, the new application has been sent to DOH, so it should be on their website soon, and it has been uploaded to the CHFA website as well. So the newest versions are available there. Again, this is just a screenshot of the different ConApp section in the SharePoint site. So one of the last areas is the file upload section, where we have a different bunch of folders that are set up for each area of the consolidated application. With this, you can upload a bunch of files at once. Really, you just sort of drag and drop them into the appropriate folder, or you can manually upload each file that's in there one at a time if you wanted to. One thing I do want to note for this is we're requesting that you try and limit your file names to an abbreviated version as possible, just so that way when we're reviewing everything, we don't have to worry about shortening all the file names, because if they're too long, then we won't be able to download them very quickly, and we may run into issues opening the files up later on. So again, just a screenshot of what the file upload section looks like, and there should be one folder for each different area that is associated with the consolidated application. So as you finish attachments or different backup information, try and put it in the respective folder that it's applicable to. So once you have access to the SharePoint site, once the initial primary contact is logged in, they can share the site with as many team members as they want to. So again, you can assign different tasks. You can work on the same consolidated application workbook that's saved onto the site rather than try and email a different version back and forth. And you can have multiple people uploading the files as they're completed. So there is a help section within SharePoint itself. It has instructions and it should be kind of step-by-step to walk you through. You can access it a couple different ways in the upper left section of the home screen, or there's links within each section of the SharePoint site. So I think there's a couple animated things, yeah. So the reference library, like I said earlier, it's kind of like the document storage area for all the different templates and fillable forms that you'll need to use for the application submission. So there's a lot of PDFs in there. There's a blank version of the Khan app that you can save onto your device in case somehow you override the one that's built into the main area of the SharePoint site. So this is kind of another version you could use, and it also includes the submission instructions for sending in your application. So when you are ready to submit your application, we just want to suggest and recommend that you upload all the documents that are associated with it as early as possible. This way, if you run into any errors because you lose your internet connection or something takes a long time to upload because you may have a slow bandwidth rate, or if there's any kind of problems, you don't wait till the last minute and potentially miss the opportunity to submit it. When the applications are sent in, we won't review anything until after the application cutoff. So even if you lock it a week beforehand, we're still not going to start looking at it until after the deadline when everyone needs to have their stuff submitted. Nothing that's sent in via email will be considered as part of the application unless we specifically ask you to send it to us. And just again, to submit your application ahead of time, you would just mark off all the items in the task list section as being completed. So there aren't a significant number of changes to the consolidated application this year. A lot of them were related to the QAP and the previous HTCC round. Some of the tech items that were mentioned earlier are also listed off here with the energy conservation and the extraordinary costs. A couple minor formulaic changes and some little bit of revised language, but nothing major that would be needed to be concerned about from this area.
All right, thanks, Chris. So that completes all the presentations and we will take questions. I know some of my colleagues have been answering them in the chat. I haven't been able to keep up with that. Terry or Seema, is there something we should share with everybody?
Debbie, I did put in for everyone to view. Anytime we were seeing questions related to, things that we could answer, I think they are available for everyone.
Hi, this is Miguel. I raised my hand. I don't know if how you'd like to go with the Q&A. But my question is to our esteemed friends at SHPO, a recent activity that we shared. The project was new construction, but it happened to be in a historic district, be it state or federal. What should people be aware of? And you might have reviewed this. Should they be contacting you or just working with the local historical group commissions?
Yeah, great question. We see this happen, at least a couple of times each round. The bottom line is, while the information that the project proponent gets from the local group, whether it's a municipal, historic district commission, or even a municipal nonprofit like, Hartford Preservation Alliance or New Haven Preservation Trust, those are only advisory. The bottom line is that our overview and review is what matters. So while, I know that some people spend a lot of time getting those, don't bother. I mean, it's good to have, you're going to have it to go through their internal process anyway. But the bottom line here is that any new construction in a state or national registered district has got to conform, if you're using state or federal funding, to the district. So what that means is it's really clear. It doesn't have to be some identical building that fits into the district, but it's got to be compatible in things like size, and volume, and some level of design, setback. Those things are important. Now, that's not to say that there's not ways to get bigger buildings in the district. It happens literally all the time. We're always building in a district. The laws that are for state, the State Historic Preservation Office for Historic Preservation is not there to stop development. In fact, we want to promote development. SHPO is under DECD, right? So we want to use the other tools that we have to help the development have a compatible design that fits into the district, so it doesn't distract from the historic resource. Did I answer the question, Miguel? I know I started rambling.
No, I think it's also important to say that there is a distinction between a local historic district and what we put in the chat about what our office considers a historic property, which is a property that is listed or determined to be eligible for listing on either the state or national register. So a local historic district is very different. They're created by municipalities and they're overseen by municipalities, and they have a local separate process. But when you're talking about state or federal funding, the person that you need to talk to, the people that you need to talk to, is SHPO. So remember that acronym, SHPO. And if you have questions, if you're not sure, if you're in a local historic district, those boundaries may not be the same. The local historic district may have created a very specific section of town that they recognize as important, but there may be other historic resources. So again, as we always say, reach out to us early and say, you know, we're doing a project. I'm not sure if it's in a historic area or not, and we can help you out.
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, looking through the chat, there was a question regarding 4% tax credits. The question was, will an allocation of 4% credits be limited to the feasibility of a project? Does this mean a project cannot maximize tax credits to reduce leverage? In other words, if a project can support greater debt, the credit allocation will be reduced? And the answer to that is yes. We are required to put the minimum amount of credit in to make a deal feasible. We also have debt service coverage requirements. We have minimums as well as maximums. So if there is an ability to carry additional debt, we would look to see that happen. I think Seema answered questions regarding preservation and broadband. Did you answer that one, Seema, the broadband?
Sorry, Debbie, I didn't see that one. Let me quickly get to it. What was the question?
Does the high-speed broadband access simply mean that all units are wired for it, or does the owner need to provide access at a specific price range for tenants?
Okay, so we've explained this as in the guideline as to what is required. We require the fiber to be provided to all the units, and free Wi-Fi to be provided for the community room. And the third point is you have to provide evidence that you reached out to internet service providers to get a subsidized plan. You know, you may be able to get one or you may not be able to get, but you have to show the intent to reach out and demonstrate that in form of a letter. Let us know any barriers or challenges that you face. And again, it is covered in the sustainable energy conservation and sustainability guideline.
Thank you,
Did I
Seema.
answer that?
Okay, another question that I don't see was answered. Under the preservation section, it was stated that to be eligible, it must be existing, occupied, multifamily rental dwellings. What is CHFA's definition of multifamily? I The easy answer is not single family. So single family is typically defined as 1 to 4 units. Multifamily is 5 and above.
Yeah, yeah.
I will just add that these are residential units that don't include commercial services. So our multifamily doesn't include things like hotels, motels, inns, nursing homes, or similar types of businesses. They could be detached, one building, multiple buildings or more, and different styles. So garden style, walk up, elevator buildings. But 5 units or more is our typical multifamily development. All of these questions that are in the chat box now and that we're discussing, we're going to publish in a frequently asked questions. And as folks have questions throughout the application period and may ask them, send in an email question, we'll repost so that everyone has benefit of the community's collective, inquiries. There was another question about preliminary applications and conferences in the context of 4% LIHTC applications. Is a preliminary application and conference required for a 4% LIHTC project? And the thought is that although the 4% applications are not held to the same time frame as 9% applications, yes, you are required to attend a preliminary conference. Submitting a preliminary application would be a useful exercise because it provides a format for the conversation. But if you've already engaged as a 4% LIHTC application in the developer engagement profile process with DOH, you may not need to submit a preliminary application again because you're already undergoing a process that's very similar. More to come on that. You'll see when we respond in writing. We'll have more details.
All right, are there any other questions? I see that I think everything else has been addressed in the chat. All right, if there's nothing else, or if something comes up later, you can feel free to reach out to any of us directly. There is a question directed just to me, I believe, regarding the intermediary cost points. There is a typo in the QAP. The maximum amount of points for the lowest intermediary cost is 4 this year. There's a typo in the language, I believe, but the points below it are correct. All right, we did record this session. You can view it later, as well as we will post these slides separately if you'd like to refer back to them. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And let us know if there are any further questions. Thank you very much to all my fellow presenters. I really appreciate your help. Great to have partnerships so strong within the state agencies.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, everyone.
Much appreciated. Have a great rest of the day.